Tonight, I'm lucky to be joined by two of the nation's leading voices on voting rights and democracy. There is always so much to do to ensure every voice is heard and every vote is counted. And in this time of coronavirus, we are bearing witness to critical steps our national leaders need to take to ensure that states can have fair and democratic elections. I want to thank Desmond Meade and Ben Wikler for spending some time with us to share their wisdom and thinking about this moment and beyond. Desmond Meade is the President and Executive Director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. The FRRC is nationally recognized for its work on voting and criminal justice reform issues. In 2018, Desmond led the FRRC to a historic victory with the successful passage of Amendment 4, a grassroots citizens initiative which restored voting rights to over 1.4 million Floridians with past felony convictions. Amendment 4 represented the single largest expansion of voting rights in the United States in half a century and brought an end to 150 years of a Jim Crow-era law in Florida. Ben Wikler is the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. I met Ben many years ago, when we were handsome young whippersnappers, and we have been partners in the movement ever since. I'm worried that the Wisconsin primary election is a preview to what could happen in November and know that Ben has been at the forefront of fighting for a different outcome. You moved there to take the reins of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, and ensure we do everything in our power to ensure Democrats hold Wisconsin against Donald Trump in 2020. Let me start with this. What did you learn watching the debacle play out in Wisconsin's Democratic primary election this month, as state officials decided to go forward with an in-person election despite the advice of public health experts across the country?
Ady, thank you. It's so good to see you, and it's so good to be in this movement with you and with you, Desmond, and folks across the country. Wisconsin, if it's really close, Wisconsin is the state that could tip the Electoral College either way. And you don't have to take it from me. The Trump campaign held a briefing that was secretly leaked, and they said that if we win Wisconsin, we win the election. If we lose Wisconsin, we lose the election. So one of the things I saw on April 7th is how much the Trump operation and Trump himself personally is involved in Wisconsin politics now. He was clearly getting briefed about our Supreme Court race in the middle of supposedly managing the coronavirus response, and he talked about it in his televised press conference. What we also saw is that the Wisconsin Republicans and the national Republicans are willing to throw people into lethal danger in order to suppress the votes of people that they think will vote against them. We just got the news this week that at least 7 people in Milwaukee contracted coronavirus in election-related activities. That number is likely to go up significantly. And this was totally foreseeable and foreseen. More than a week out, our governor called on Republicans to agree to a plan to mail ballots to every registered voter. They mocked it. They said that was a hoax. They totally refused. There was a federal judicial case where the Democratic Party of Wisconsin and a bunch of civil rights and grassroots groups were suing to try to delay the election and get ballots mailed to every voter. The judge said it had to be the legislature and the governor reaching an agreement to do that. The governor called for the legislature, which is run by Republicans in our state, who are in power thanks to gerrymandering, even though they lost the popular vote in 2018. The governor called for Republicans to delay the election and mail a ballot to everyone, and Republicans had a kind of a joke of a legislative session, lasted 17 seconds. They did nothing. And then when the governor tried to use his emergency powers to delay the election, Republicans sued to the state Supreme Court and won a partisan decision overriding him. And at the same time, the Republican National Committee sued all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And on the same night, the night before the election, the US Supreme Court blocked an extension on absentee voting that a lower court had awarded. And suddenly, we had about 18 hours left to get ballots in for them to be legally counted. We then saw this horrifying specter of people having to choose between the threat to their lives of coronavirus or losing their right to vote. And thousands of people stood in lines, often for hours. Milwaukee, 97% of polling places were shut down because so many poll workers had canceled. And then they cast their votes and went home hoping that they hadn't caught coronavirus. The other thing that we learned, as well as the kind of ruthlessness that we're seeing on the other side, the weaponization of coronavirus as a tool of voter suppression, The other thing we saw was the power of organizing. Several weeks out, we switched to a 100% virtual organizing strategy. And what we saw was a massive, massive shift across the state, but most of all in Milwaukee. Milwaukee had the highest rate of absentee voting of any county in the state, a massive shift to voting by mail from home. We'll talk more today about what that organizing involves and what it takes to vote by mail. But I think we really saw a demonstration of the fact that people get mad when you try to take their right to vote away. And we can organize and we can work with people to fight through these gigantic and dangerous obstacles Republicans put in our way, and we can make a difference and we can still win, even in the face of what they're trying to pull off.
Desmond, you know better than anyone what it means to overcome systemic voter suppression. You have a powerful story you have told about why you are such a fierce advocate for restoring the right to vote to people with past felony convictions. And you helped pass a historic amendment to the Florida Constitution in 2018 that gave ballot access back to more than 1 million more Floridians. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and tell us also about how the governor and legislature responded to Amendment 4, and how your battle with them is playing out in the federal courts?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you, Ady, for having me on. I got to tell you, I'm now aspiring to one day be recognized as a handsome whippersnapper. I think that's going to be one of my future goals. But it's definitely a pleasure to speak with you and your viewers. My story is very simple. What started my journey was the fact that I am what we call a returning citizen, a person with previous felony conviction. And because I lived in the state of Florida, I faced a lifetime ban. My wife ran for office in 2016, and I couldn't even vote for her, knowing that in multiple states throughout the country, even in Puerto Rico, prisoners were able to participate in the presidential preference primaries. But because I lived in Florida, I was told that my voice didn't matter. I was less than a citizen. And so we rallied around just the all-American nature of voting, that every American citizen should have this access. And we launched the ballot initiative, and it was a purely grassroots effort. We defied all odds, and we did get on that ballot. And not only did we get there, we ended up winning in November of 2018. And what happened by winning was the fact that 1.4 million Floridians regained the right to vote after they've served their time. How we won was the fact that we was able to take a grassroots effort and bring together people from all walks of life, even from all political persuasions, to vote yes on Amendment 4. But as we all know, the minute politicians stick their hands in the water, it gets a little dirty. And that's exactly what happened when we won, with the governor insisting that we needed implementation legislation when we did not. And of course, when you have a Republican governor with a Republican-controlled Senate and a Republican-controlled House of Representatives, what the governor wants, he's going to typically get. The language in our amendment specifically stated that a person with a felony conviction was able to have their civil rights restored, but they had to fully complete their sentence first. And the legislation added financial barriers or added financial obligations to the phrase completion of sentence, which there created a financial hurdle for a lot of folks especially people who were poor. One of the stories, actually, it's a couple of stories I want to share with you. I remember once Amendment 4 passed, we had a gentleman in Broward County that said that he don't care if there's a dog catcher race going on. He wants to vote, right? And then we had a lady in Orange County who wanted to vote for so long and wanted so badly to vote that during elections, she would go to the supervisor of elections office just to watch people vote. And so I do believe that it is vitally important to give folks an opportunity to feel like they're a part of this democracy again, and we're going to ensure that their voices are heard in 2020.
Desmond, your story and your struggle are so historic, and we are blessed to have you leading this movement. Thank you for your heroism and your power. I have a question for both of you. Milwaukee is one of the most racially unequal cities in the country, and Florida has been oppressing and disenfranchising Black people for centuries. Both Florida and Wisconsin have no-fault absentee voting. But what is the reality for folks who want to use it? And can you describe the process of how easy or hard it is to vote by mail in your states?
Wisconsin has no excuse absentee voting on paper, but there's a problem. Because of laws Republicans put in place in our state, to request an absentee ballot, you have to upload a photo of your voter ID. Or if you do it by mail, you have to mail in a photocopy or a scanned printout of your voter ID. In other words, the voter suppression laws that they put in place to stop people from voting at the polls, they've also used for voting from home. In Wisconsin, according to one analysis, African Americans are 50% more likely to not have voter IDs. It is tough, especially in the middle of a pandemic, to go to a DMV, to take a bus, to find a way to ride in a car, to go to a DMV and get a driver's license or another legally valid ID issued. There are a lot of people who don't know how to upload a photo of anything, even if they have the right ID. So there are major hurdles in place. And then once you get your absentee ballot, once you actually fill it out, you then need a witness to sign the outside of the ballot to verify that you are who you say you are. And in a time of social distancing, that's tough for a lot of people. If you live alone, it is not easy to get a safe witness signature. So the Democratic Party of Wisconsin went to court to try to change all this. We made the case that this would disenfranchise thousands and thousands of people. And we made our case, and Republicans, the Wisconsin GOP, the Republican National Committee intervened on the other side. We have not yet won relief in the courts. And the United States Supreme Court upheld lower court decisions denying us relief on the voter ID requirements and on the witness requirements. So those are still in place. We want to open up as many pathways to voting as possible, make them as easy as possible, and help people through those options so that we can keep people safe and get votes cast.
I don't say this much often, but fortunately in Florida, we're not that bad. That's one of the very few things I guess that we can hang our hat on. But yeah, voting by mail is fairly easy in Florida. And I mean, people can change that designation that, when we're registering them. Even registered voters could take that same voter registration card and request a vote by mail ballot. They could do it online as well as in person at the supervisor of elections office. But here's a key piece. We know that voting by mail is very effective. It's been that way. Studies have shown that for quite some time. But what we also know is that it's not as effective with the African American community. And part of that reason is that African American community does not trust that system. And so I think that we have to take it a step further than just ensuring that folks can vote by mail. We have to engage in conversations with people in our community about how it is beneficial, or why they should not have as much apprehensions. And what we found was that a lot of these stories that are put out there to give people reason to fear voting by mail. For instance, in our last gubernatorial election, there were thousands upon thousands of ballots that was left in post office, right? And folks are concerned about their vote not being counted. I mean, because we were already been conditioned to believe that there are all kinds of suppression methods that are out there, and people are feeling that the only way to fight through it is to actually go to the voting location and cast their ballot. I think the task that we have here in Florida is really figuring out how to alleviate some of the fears that are present in minority communities that would allow folks to participate and vote by mail.
Thank you, Ben. You are one of a handful of people across the country who has been part of a virtual election like this, What should it teach us going into November?
In Wisconsin, we started organizing in the spring of 2017, right after the loss to Trump. And for years, the focus was on building a massive network of neighborhood teams of volunteers who would knock on the doors of their own neighbors to mobilize them to vote in person. In mid March, everything changed. We realized people weren't going to want to knock on doors and they wouldn't want to open doors, and they shouldn't. It would be a public health risk. So we went completely virtual. And what that meant for us was using every organizing tactic that didn't involve getting within 6 feet of a voter. We texted, we made phone calls, we made millions of voter contact attempts. We reached out on social media. We used relational voting tools where you actually match your phone's contacts to people in the voter file so that you can reach out and take responsibility for mobilizing those folks. And we followed up over and over with people. The great thing in Wisconsin is that you can get the list of people who have requested an absentee ballot, people who've received them, and people who've turned them in. And I think that's true in other states as well. So you can focus your organizing on people where you know what phase of the process they're in and help them get to the next phase. The critical thing for us was having enough volunteer power to be able to pour ourselves into reaching out through lots of different channels so that we could basically connect with people wherever they were, whatever they were comfortable with. And wherever we had volunteers, we could actually set up local virtual phone banks so that it wasn't neighbors knocking on neighbors' doors, it was neighbors calling neighbors' cell phones. People would recognize a local area code and be able to pick up. We use auto dialers, we use peer-to-peer texting programs, and this was all complemented by, digital ads on TV, pieces of mail in people's mailboxes. The impact of all this can be seen in the rate of absentee ballots that flowed in. The torrent of absentee ballots started early. It wasn't just a rush at the end, and it lasted all the way until the final buzzer when polls closed on April 7th. I think the key lesson to learn across the country is that vote by mail elections can actually be more people powered than the votes at the door, because people can pour their hours in, not just in the final week, final weekend, but all the way through to help people get their absentee ballot requests in and to turn them in.
Ben, Desmond, I want to thank you both for your leadership in Wisconsin and Florida. I think that the two of you and your comrades are doing some of the most important work anywhere to save our democracy. If people want to send 10 or 50 bucks your way, what would their contributions allow you to do?
If you chip in at wisdems.org/beahero, we're going to put that money into organizing juice in Wisconsin to help our folks, help everyone get absentee ballots, vote safely, open up pathways for people to be able to cast a ballot no matter what Republicans try to throw in their path.
Yeah, so for those that want to donate to our cause, they can always visit our website at www.floridarrc.com. That's floridarrc.com.
It's been a real honor and joy to hear from and see both of you. I urge all of our viewers to donate now.
Text HERO to 50409.
And your donation will be split between the Wisconsin Democratic Party and the Rights Restoration Coalition. Lastly, I want to talk about the legislative fight in Congress right now. Speaker Pelosi needs to ensure that money for states to implement vote by mail across the board is included in any stimulus bill that moves through Congress. Ben, Desmond, what thoughts do you have about what we can do to ensure that this happens? Who should people call, or text, or email?
Anyone who has a phone. After you text HERO to make your donation, you should then dial 202-224-3121 and call the congressional switchboard and tell your member of Congress, tell your senators to do everything within their power to make sure that there is funding and support for vote by mail across the country in the next stimulus bill. And if it's not in the next one, fight for it in the one after that. We need federal help. State budgets, city budgets are collapsing right now. And if we don't get that money from the federal government, lots of states will have an excuse not to make safe voting options available to all voters. So the congressional switchboard number, 202-224-3121, you can call it, you can leave a message, you can text, you can use RESISTBOT. If you text RESIST to 50409, and it'll help you send a message using text messages. Do everything you can. Just don't go protest in person. That's not a good idea right now. but everything else you can do to press your members of Congress to make sure that funding is there and that support is there from our federal government so that everyone can vote this fall.
Ben, that's like right on point, and I think we follow that up by making a commitment to not vote by ourselves. And what I mean by that is that it's one thing to call our elected officials and ask them to do something. I think the key part to that, though, is making sure that we follow up and let them know the consequences of them not doing it. Once we do that, and I think once we demonstrate that we have a commitment to ensuring that our family and friends will participate in elections and will exact consequences on the elected officials that refuse to hear our pleas, I believe that things will be much easier in the future, and these elected officials would understand the benefits of actually paying attention to their constituents and not to their big money donors or these dark accounts that they draw from.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for your leadership and for joining us for this call tonight. It is an honor to be in this struggle with you.
Yes, definitely an honor. And please, I'll be glad to come back definitely in the near future. But just like we were able to be successful with Amendment 4, we're going to be able to shift the direction of this country and regain our democracy. I don't know if it'll ever be the same, but we can make our democracy a little bit better.
Thank you, Ady, and thank you, Desmond. It is deeply inspiring to be part of this with both of you and part of this network of millions of people across the country who are fighting to create some change, to end this presidency, to throw the vote suppressors out of power, and to build something better and bigger that allows everyone to thrive and for everyone to have a voice. This is a moment of gigantic change. So much is going to change. So much has already changed, and this is just the beginning. And we can build something that's better out of the darkness that we're in right now. I'm really grateful, especially Ady, to you for your leadership. You're an inspiration to me, and I think to millions of people across this country. And I'm grateful for you using your voice, even when your vocal cords aren't working, to advocate for a difference.